All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a great day so far, and we're going to finish up in a climactic way, but then there'll be a jam session, of course, as well. But all the way, making his debut at our festival from New Orleans, Louisiana, a man with a long lineage and heritage of music in his family, and he's contributed so much to our knowledge and enjoyment of the music of New Orleans. My honor and pleasure to introduce a great friend, Mr. Louis Ford.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for putting up with me. Well, I'd like to begin, for those who were not here other days, I am a fifth generation of musicians, dated back to the late 1800s. My ancestors migrated here from Santo Domingo. My father was the fourth generation. My father was Clarence Ford Sr., played with Fats Domino for over 33 years, and among others. I have a cousin who's with me right now, still playing places like Preservation House, Nug Harbor. His name is Charlie Gabriel. The city also names his birthday as Charlie Gras and gives him the key to the city to celebrate. So we can go on and on about myself, but what we're going to do right now, I'm here to explain a little bit about New Orleans, the origin of this music, how it come about, and some of the main influences are what we call the blessed trinity of jazz, starting in New Orleans. In the late 1700s, there was a place called Congo Square. Congo Square is about 5 blocks from Bourbon Street, or the French Quarters. This area allowed those who were enslaved, those people of color, to celebrate their culture, play music, dance, sing, and worship. Now, Congo Square only allowed them to do this on a Sunday, one day out of the week. This was a law passed by the government. It's called Code, C-O-D-E, NOIR. That's the best way I can pronounce NOIR, N-O-I-R. This law protected those enslaved, those of color, on that particular day that they had the freedoms to enjoy and celebrate their culture. This went on until the beginning of the Civil War, which was in the mid-1800s. Now, Congo Square allowed those to play drums. One of the main drums was called the bambuda, which also there is a bambuda dance, and one of the most important ingredients of the New Orleans rhythm. And it goes such like this. That's called 3-3-3-2. Songs like Aiko Aiko, Mardi Gras Mambo, you can clearly, feel that rhythm of the bambuda. After Katrina, there was a series called Treme. Dun, 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 dun. Some of you all may remember that. It was produced by New Orleans native actor, well-known actor, Wendell Pierce, good friend of mine, and also we graduated together from the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. So, keep in mind, with that feeling of the bambuda, and then also the influence of the Caribbean, the clave. Dun, 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 dun. So you got these two rhythms, the clave and also the bambuda with New Orleans music. Let's take, for example, Mardi Gras Mambo. We're going to do the bambuda. Down the ones where the blues were born, it takes a cool cat to blow a horn, and so on and so on. Second line, you hear that same feeling. Boom, 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 while the saints go marching in. So, that went on until the beginning of the Civil War. Now, late 1800s, when musicians started to develop, one of the main genres was ragtime, American ragtime. A lot of people are not familiar with this or aware that the banjo originated from Africa, West Africa. So you have ragtime music, the likes of Tony Jackson. You have Ferdinand Joseph Lament, a.k.a. Jolly Roll Martin. And the list goes on and on. Early ragtime music, late 1800s, early 1900s. Then after that, you're going to have early jazz. Now, you had a trumpet player by the name of Buddy Bolden. Anybody familiar with Buddy Bolden? 1, 2. And Buddy Bolden, honestly, my opinion, and a lot of others could back me up on this, Buddy Bolden was the premier cornetist of his time. He was before his time. He was Louis Armstrong in his right, no doubt about it, but a lot of people are not familiar with Buddy Bolden. Buddy Bolden was the first to implement those styles of the influence of the African beat and the Caribbean beat in his music that we use today in New Orleans music, with the bambuda, with the clave. Louis Armstrong, he came a little later on after Buddy Bolden. That early jazz, we also had traditional brass bands. We have an upright tuba or a sousaphone. Most of the time it is a sousaphone. We would have a tailgating trombone player. Anybody familiar with a tailgating trombone? Then let me explain why it's called tailgating trombone. With the personnel of a brass band, you're going to have a trombone. You're going to have a trumpet. You're going to have a clarinet, saxophone, sousaphone, a bass drum, a snare drum. Now, during the days of campaigning, somebody's campaigning for a political seat, someone's promoting grand opening of a supermarket or what have you, they would promote through the city on a wagon and going around the city with the brass band inside the wagon while playing music with the banners on the side of the wagon. The trombone, tailgate, is at the end of the wagon, the tailgate of the wagon. Why? Trust me, you do not want to be sitting in front of a trombone, because boom, so that is the main reason, why the trombone is called the tailgate of the trombone section. So, and there was many trombone players that came out of New Orleans that were great trombonists. Kid Ory, born and raised in Laplace, Louisiana, about 20 minutes away from New Orleans, played with Louis Armstrong, led his own band. You've heard some of his tunes, I'm sure. Kid Ory was a phenomenal trombonist, entertainer, singer. You have Trummy Young. And you have today one of the more younger generation trombone tailgaters, well known as a gentleman by the name of Frederick Lonzo. He works a lot. He works so much. He never has a chance to breathe because he's in demand, because of the tailgate. Not too many tailgaters around. Everybody nowadays, young generation, they're bebopping and everything else, playing 1,000,001 notes and not giving it that traditional flavor. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Let me know if I'm going too fast. Okay, so you have the early jazz bands. Now, this went on for a period of time. Then we had Storyville. What was Storyville? City alderman by the name of Sidney Story came up with this brilliant idea. Let's separate family entertainment from adult entertainment. What does that mean? Okay, let's say stage right to your left is going to be family entertainment. Stage left to your right is going to be adult entertainment. What does that mean? Family entertainment, you got the wife, kids, the dogs, you know, everybody, you know, having a great old time. On the other side, you have alcohol. You have food, of course. And you have, let's see, are there any kids in the house? You have Creole Queens. Creole Queens were those who entertain, sing and dance with, you know. Anyway, so with those Creole Queens, you know, a lot of the naval guys from across the river would come over to hang out, obviously on the adult side, you know, and they would return back to the naval base lethargic, worn out, you know, hangovers, you know. Well, the government found out about this and decided, okay, no, we can't have this. So they shut Storyville down. Now, Storyville was the ground zero for musicians to better their craft. The likes of Jelly Roll Martin, Sidney Bechet, Willie Percy Humphrey, Tony. I mean, the list goes on, you know, but that's where they made an honest living and also have the opportunity to better their craft and take ideas from one another and, you know, start to spread this music and make a lucrative living doing it in Storyville. Unfortunately, once it was shut down in 1927, what are they to do now? Well, it's time to move on. Some went to Chicago, some went to the West Coast, East Coast, also to Europe to spread this culture of New Orleans music that originated from the African influence, the European influence, the Caribbean influence, leading into that Buddy Bolden style of drumming, the rhythms, to the early traditional, to the early ragtime, to the early brass band. So they start to take this music and introduce it around the country, around the world. Very important, very important. And you can see today a lot of the entertainment, the bands that are on the late night shows, you know, have implemented that instrumentation with the sousaphone, with that New Orleans style. If you remember Steve Colbert, the band leader, band director, was native New Orleans John Baptiste. While back, Jay Leno, the native New Orleans band leader, was Bradford Marcellus. So, but besides them being native of New Orleans, that music, you know, spread to others to carry that tradition of that New Orleans flavor. True story, I was in Malaysia one year and I was playing with a group. It was a mixture of personnel from around the country. One gentleman was from Canada, another was from Kansas City, another musician was from Virginia. I was the only one from New Orleans. Being born and raised in a musical family of ragtime, early jazz, modern jazz, R&B, you know, it was already in me, instilled in me, in my playing ability. So when we were performing, we were doing a whole bunch of music, you know, all different kinds of genres, you have it. A young lady came up to me afterwards and she said, I heard that this band was from New Orleans. Now the leader, he wasn't from New Orleans, he was from Canada. I heard this band was from New Orleans, but this band doesn't sound like New Orleans, but you sound like you're from New Orleans. Yeah, so I didn't know how to answer that, you know, but I know when I play, and when I used to watch and listen to my father play, you know, there's a feel, you know, and every musician in here, you know, it's from the heart, you know, so you can feel it. But I don't know if it was my dance steps, you know, because sometimes when we playing, we up here dancing and everything else. So, but some other guys that I was with, they were just straight and, you know, being much more in a legit classical sense, you know, but it was because of me being around second lines all my life, me being around R&B, ragtime, early jazz, modern jazz, everybody's just swinging. Everybody's just dancing. So I don't know how she was able to make that analogy about me being different from the other cats in the band. So anyway, that's a story for another day. Anyway, so this music transcends from one genre to the other. Ragtime, early jazz, early brass band, and then on to R&B. And then you have bebop. Now, bebop wasn't as popular in New Orleans as it was or is today in New York, somewhere like that. But yes, there was a lot of beboppers. My father was a bebopper as well. I'm able to go from one genre to the other. Famous drummer by the name of James Black. Keyboardist by the name of Edward Frank. So this list goes on and on about these musicians that we are, because of us being surrounded in this melting pot of genres, we're able to adapt and cross over from one to the other. So that's how this music started to spread, and the multicultural of all these elements coming together, making New Orleans what it is today. So, with that being said, the contemporary brass bands. What are the contemporary brass bands opposed to the traditional brass bands? Contemporary brass bands originated by a group called the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen. And it was formed in the early 1990s. The reason I know this so well is because they wanted me to perform with them too, but I couldn't on account of I was still working on my music degree and education degree in college, because they were already traveling the country, traveling the world. They were the very first brass band to take any song, any popular song, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, who else comes to mind? It could be Elton John. They could take any one of these songs from these composers, entertainers, artists, Frank Sinatra, and make it into a contemporary brass band song. So, I mean, that went overnight worldwide. Wow, this is different. And it gave people something else to jam to dance to. And to this day, they're traveling around the world. Matter of fact, right now they're in California, and they're going to be there for another 2-3 days, and then they have to head to Paris after that. You know, that's how popular they are. But because of that influence, a lot of the younger generations, as we know, everybody in here from generation to generation, things change. And a lot of the younger generation nowadays who want to become musicians, they want to be contemporary brass band musicians. They come dime a dozen in New Orleans right now. Everywhere you go, you're going to hear a brass band. If it's for a parade, for somebody's birthday, a wedding, and again, also one of the most important things was the jazz funeral. So I hope I covered all those genres for you, how New Orleans, you know, played a vital, important part to the multicultural experience of being a New Orleans musician and how it helped become New Orleans as the birthplace of jazz, starting back in Congo Square. So I'm going to talk about one more thing. It was the jazz funeral. Show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with the jazz funeral? Okay, good, good. All right, for those who are not, we're going to start back from the beginning, how it started. Now, with the brass bands, there were many purposes of the brass bands. Brass bands covered social need pleasure clubs. What are social need pleasure clubs? Their role was in the community to help one another out. Let's say doctor bills, rent, mortgage, a birthday party, what have you. And what they would do, they would have this party, this get together, the band would play, and from that music, where's that music coming from? Oh, it's down there. Okay, let's go check it out. And then before you know it, you got yourself a nice party to help, benefit those who are in need or to celebrate. Well, one of the most important purposes of the brass band was the jazz funeral. When someone passes on, they would have a jazz funeral. Matter of fact, today, as I'm standing here right now, there's one going on. A very talented drummer, only 50-something years old, lost his life. He played with me at Preservation Hall. He was a member of the Press Hall brass band, and he was struck down by DUI, drunk driver. So the whole city is mourning right now. There's a big celebration for him, for his transition at Mahalia Jackson Auditorium. It's streaming too as well. So one of the reasons, one of the most important reasons of the brass band is for jazz funerals.
Lewis, who was it?
Carrie Hunter, H-U-N-T-E-R, yeah. It was 2 weeks ago, just walking across the street, and poor guy, he hit him and he dragged him. He didn't even know that he was dragging him. Yeah, so, and you feel for the young driver too, because he was a great athlete at Xavier University. He was on his way to become professional. So anyway, so much for that. So with the brass band for a jazz funeral, you're at the church, and then you have the ushers bring the casket out, place the casket into the hearse. The brass band is outside waiting. So you have the brass band up front. Behind the brass band, you're going to have the hearse. Behind the hearse, you're going to have the immediate family members. Behind that, you're going to have people who just want to be a part of, friends, and those who are off the street just want to be a part of. Go online this afternoon and plug it in if you can find the news, and you're going to see how big that jazz funeral is, because it's still going on right now. It started at 10 o'clock this morning. So they're having a big celebration for him right now as we speak, celebrating his life. And that's what a brass band does. So what you do now, once everybody is lined up for the procession, they slowly march to the cemetery. And the brass band will play a dirge, a spiritual song like Just a Closer Walk with Thee, Amazing Grace. It can be any spiritual. So once the body reaches the cemetery, the priest, the rabbi, minister would say a couple of words, and then it's called cut the body loose. Cut the body loose. That means that's when they place the body in the plot or in 6 feet under. Now, in New Orleans, we put everything above. Why? Because we're below sea level. And I don't know if you remember during Katrina, they were showing footage of a lot of floating caskets. from some areas that had the caskets below. And that's why, because of being below sea level, and water hits and pops up, boom, you know. So anyway, so once the body's cut loose, the trumpet would give a bugle call, bum, 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 bum. That means it's time for the musicians to assemble, get in place, and the drums will give a little cadence with a roll off, and then they would strike up a song, a joyous song, celebrating the life of the dearly departed. Oh, Didn't He Ramble is one song when the saints go marching in. Bourbon Street Parade, Paul Barberand's second line. It goes on and on. And then now we're celebrating his life, or her life, marching down second lining to his or her stomping grounds. What I mean by that, it could be their famous hangout area where they used to go and hang out after work, their home, nightclub, what have you. And that can go on for hours. Brass bands back in the days would march from morning until sundown. They would go from one pub, one nightclub to the other, so they can get a little refreshments, a drink of water, you know, to cool themselves down, and then move on to the next club. So anyway, so that is the role of many of the roles of the brass band. And brass bands are so popular in New Orleans, from the traditional and the contemporary, you know, and with the architecture, the culture, multicultures of New Orleans. Many people from abroad love to have their weddings in New Orleans, and a lot of popular celebrities come in town. Let's see, for example, the tennis star Serena Williams. Anybody familiar with her? Yeah, she was married in New Orleans. Let me see who else. There's a plethora of them, you know, that come to New Orleans to have a wedding. Matter of fact, I guarantee you right now, normally on a weekend, there's about 5 or 6 weddings going on with a brass band. You would have a brass band marching down the street. Every other block you're going to hear, you're going to see. So it is an experience to be a part of. So right now, I'll tell you what, let's open up for some Q&A. Is that okay with you all? Do we have any questions? No? Okay.
I got one.
Yes.
I wasn't here at the start, so sorry you covered this, but yesterday you mentioned that you're 5th generation.
Yes.
Did you talk at all about the experience of your family going back? Did you have family that played with any notable musicians at the 20s?
Briefly, but not much. Okay, yeah, that is a good question. My ancestral line. Once my ancestors migrated here from Santo Domingo, my great uncle, believe it or not, how many of you guys are familiar with the spiritual His Eyes on the Sparrow? Well, if you look at the composer's name, it's going to say Charlie H. Gabriel. Charlie H. Gabriel. My first cousin from my fourth generation, his name is Charlie H. Gabriel. Why? Because that's part of our ancestors. That was my great uncle, Charlie H. Gabriel, who have composed His Eyes on Sparrow. So we had bass players, we had violinists, we had ragtime pianists, moving all the way up to trumpet, you name it, all the instruments, major instruments that help, you know, mold New Orleans what it is today. My cousin Charlie's a tenor saxophone player, clarinet, flute, just as my father. They grew up together, side by side. He told me a story one time, cousin Charlie Gabriel, he told me a story that we were on a gig and he played Body and Soul, beautiful ballad. So he played the transcription of Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins in his solo. And I was just, wow, you know, and it just gives me goosebumps because he sounds and plays just like my father. Well, again, they grew up together. And the reason is because my uncle used to put them in a chicken coop. Does everybody know what a chicken coop is? Yeah, and that was his way to say, okay, this is your assignment. You're going to learn Lester Young's transcription, Coleman Hawkins' transcription. And I will let you out once, you know, you proved to me that, and listen, let me tell you, when he played those two transcriptions back to back flawlessly, those times in the chicken coop paid off. You know, my father was a member of Fast Diamond for 33 years. He recorded with numerous people. The great Patti LaBelle, it goes on and on. They were always working. My dad worked to the day he passed on. It was because of all that hard work. And I asked my cousin Charlie, when did you learn this? He said, me and your father were 11 years old. 11. I don't know about you, but when I was 11, I was riding my English racer. I was riding my bicycle, playing street ball. You know, at that time, it was a different time. You know, they were preparing themselves for life early in life. And to this day, that hard work pays off. Yeah. So I have a 6 and a 7 generation under me. I have a nephew, his name is Thaddeus Ford, after my brother. He plays trumpet. He's well known in the Dallas area. And then I have a niece. She's in theatrical, dance and singing, and right now she's being trained right now in New York City. So carrying on that Ford Gabriel, you know, bloodline in the music and entertainment industry. Does that answer your question?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Yes.
Were there any other women that in your family that
Yes,
were
my
musicians?
aunt Alberta, she played piano. She was in theatrical. Married to my uncle August. He was an upright bassist. Worked Preservation Hall, Mahogany Hall. So yeah, it's in the blood. Yeah, both sides.
I have 2 questions. Question number 1. First of all, I enjoyed everything that you said. I learned some things. I knew some of that.
Oh, really?
A lot of
Oh,
things.
thank you. Thank you so much.
But my question
Who
is-
paid him to say that?
Tom Book was here a few years ago, and of course he gave his rendition of some New Orleans stuff. And he went on to mention something about quadrilles, or something like that.
About what?
Was it
Quadrilles.
quadrilles?
Quadrilles.
Yeah, I may not be pronouncing it. That was important for him.
Yes.
Is that more of a Caucasian kind of version? of New Orleans
That
version
is
of
the
Tom
influence
Jones?
of the European.
Okay.
Music of rote, like you could take a magical, like you could take like Creole bells. You know, you heard that last night.
Yeah.
You know, so music of rote, anything like that. That's a plenty is another one.
Okay.
So you can take quadrilles and put them together. And again, what I mentioned before about those influences of the African beat, the Caribbean beat, and also European music of rote, madrigals. You put all those elements together, voila.
Gotcha.
You got a bowl of gumbo.
Well, I was waiting to see if you were gonna mention that in your talk, and you didn't, so I was just wondering if it was important.
Yeah, very important, no doubt about that. I always say African influence, European influence, and the Caribbean influence. Those 3 elements. Blessed Trinity.
All right, my other question is just sort of a summary of your funeral that you described. So when the business of music comes into play, I know they're there for the funeral, but the brass band, explain again in a nutshell, how are they paid? Is they're there to mourn only, or is that part of the entertainment? I
No,
need
not
that perspective.
entertainment. They're there to support.
Okay.
Not
It's an outreach.
all. Last request of someone would want a brass band funeral. My dad did not want that, although the city wanted that, you know. He just wanted something quiet, you know. But that is a signature send-off of New Orleans, you know, those who pass on, to have a jazz funeral. When Sidney Bechet moved to Paris, they gave him a jazz funeral, something that they were not familiar with. And I mean, the whole country of France, you know, loved Sidney Bechet dearly. And they had to give him a send-off with that New Orleans flavor.
Thank you for your answer.
Anyone else? Yes.
Okay, I'm the most naive person in the room, but some authors, when they talk about blues, distinguish between the early blues before they got to the city
Yeah.
and learned something about music, and the blues they were originally playing. Does that simply not exist in the New Orleans history?
It does, but early blues originated Mississippi, down home blues. You hear a lot of, I don't know, like a B.B. King. He's much more of a modern, you know, but the blues was a way of expressing themselves, mainly the sharecroppers. Not only did they sing a lot of spirituals while they were out there in the fields, they sang the blues, you know. Now, blues, when people think of blues, they're thinking, okay, is it sad? Is it always sad? No, not necessarily so. There are happy blues as well. The Basin Street blues, that's a happy blues. You know, down home blues, that's a happy blues, you know. You have blues that, you know, relates to the hard times, hardships, pain and suffering, you know, being on the fields, picking cotton, what have you. But the blues originated, you know, mainly in that Mississippi Delta region.
Delta blues?
Yeah, Delta blues. Does that answer your question?
Well, but there was a distinction then between people before they got to the city and learned something about music
Yes.
and what they were originally playing.
Now,
So in New Orleans, the way you were describing it, there was never a time when they didn't already have people around them who knew musical stuff.
yes, that is true too. Now, a lot of the composers of the early 1900s to the mid recordings, let's say like Fats Domino, you know, he used simple 1, 4, 5, 7, 4 back to 1, or 2, 6, 5 back to 1, or a simpler term, just a simple 12-bar blues. A lot of the R&B songs were based on blues chords, 1, 4, 5 back to 1. Frankie Ford comes to mind. Frogman Henry comes to mind. Even the late great Alan Toussaint, or the late great Dr. John used the blues formula in their music. But as far as the early blues, the Delta blues originated there. And also when it came to New Orleans, they just improvised a little bit more, elaborated other ways rather than you don't, you know, even don't, and then just jazz it up more with all those ingredients from, you know, from those genres that we mentioned earlier. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jeff, you had a question?
No, just, this is great. This is exactly what I was hoping would be happening here. So thank you, Louis. Keep going.
Okay. Yes.
You mentioned after R&B was what, bebop? Is that what you said?
No, that came, actually bebop was in the mid-1900s. Now early R&B too, but we're talking about 50s to the 60s, you know.
Sort of a doo-wop era.
Doo-wop era, yeah, you know, Fats Domino, Frankie, the Dixie Chicks, you know, yeah, that was in that area. Yeah.
So I have a question about New Orleans today. If a young musician, you know, at the age of 11 is coming up in the New Orleans tradition, learning to play, are we still learning like you did the like Alphonse Picou High Society, or is that still part of the tradition, or is that
Oh,
disappearing?
wow. I don't know how much time we have.
You got another 10 minutes or so.
Huh?
You got another 10 minutes or so.
Oh, wow. Let me sit down on this. Well, things have changed, mainly for the worse. Back in the days, like I mentioned before about my father and my cousin, music was it, you know? And my father made a very good living playing music and supported 5 kids. Sent us to schools that we had to pay tuition, sent us through college by being a musician. You know, nowadays it's pretty much impossible unless you are Beyonce, you know, or Taylor Swift. We had, when I was growing up, from elementary on up, secondary, we had feeder schools. Those feeder schools from elementary on up, we had music classes. Everyone in here wanted to be a part of that music class to learn a particular instrument. No, we didn't have music students mixed with everybody else, which would make it impossible to try to teach music to those who are there interested in learning music. And that's the problem today. We have feeder schools, so the next band director in the middle schools, his job was a lot easy because you guys were already prepared to go to the next level. You already knew how to play the piano, clarinet, banjo, trombone, etc. And then you just move on to the next levels of education. Then that feeder school feeds you to the high school level, bam. So that's how we were well-rounded. We had a music supervisor. That music supervisor went through every school. This is what you're supposed to be working on right now, and you need at least 5, 6 people out your band program, orchestra, to prepare themselves for the Louisiana Music Education Association competition, concert, jazz band, marching band, all of the above. And at that time, everybody wanted to be in a band. When we were young, we used to march down the street, you know, like we were in a parade, you know, me and my buddies, you know, we wanted to do that. We used to work hard at it. A friend of mine, he wanted to be a drummer so bad in a very world-renowned high school, St. Augustine Senior High School. He used to practice with a cardboard box with strings on it, like that was the straps, and he would march, you know, around his house, practicing to prepare himself for that next level, the opportunity of marching in that band someday. Everybody had music classes. After Katrina, everything went belly up. No more music supervisor. No more teachers union. Everything now is privatized. Charter schools. People with big pockets to make more money by taking a building and leasing it out and renovating it to a school, and as many kids as they can bring in, that's I think it's like 3,500 per kid. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And the perks of all those kids passing the state exam, they get themselves a big check, you know, awarding them for a job well done. As far as the kid is concerned, they're cramming the kid to prepare themselves for that state exam from day one, the day the school opens, to the time for their test to start and finish. And then after that, you have a month or so left. So, okay, teachers are burned out now. What are we gonna do? Okay, let's, it's field trip time. You know, let's bring them to the amusement park. Let's bring them to the water park. What about those bad so-and-so kids? Let's dump them off with the band director. He have to babysit them. So that's the reason why a lot of the music in New Orleans is starting to meet its demise, unfortunately. There's a bunch of us who are fighting to protect, preserve, and perpetuate this music. No doubt about that. And yes, we are breaking way to get to some of these kids, you know, to want to do the right thing and learn. If you want to be a musician, not necessarily saying that you have to, but if you want to, as a hobby or as a spare time from a 9-to-5 job, you know, this is the route you need to take. You know, follow those who are still here today that are willing to mentor you, teach you, you know, this. We have brass bands right now who just wears anything, you know, and I'm talking about from Caucasian brass bands, African American brass bands, Asian brass bands, you name it. We have them all, but they have lost sight of the proper attire. They wear whatever they want. And hoodie, we're talking about hoodies, we're talking about jeans, tennis shoes, caps on their head. And we see this for jazz funerals, they dress like that. The traditional way of a brass band attire, if it's a funeral, if it's 100 degrees out there, they're going to have a coat and tie on with a black tie and a black cap. You know, in paying tribute and, you know, their respect to the village party. If it's a celebratory event, wedding, birthday party, a divorce party, you know, they're going to wear a white hat with most of the time a red tie, you know. But with the education of music in New Orleans, of the culture of the music in New Orleans, it's pretty bad. I work with the Smithsonian Jazz Masterwork Orchestra, and we do 2 weeks in spring, 2 weeks in fall. We go from school to school. And we would, show of hands, how many of you all ever heard of Louis Armstrong? No, I'm giving you an example. Show of hands, how many of you all have ever heard of Louis Armstrong? Maybe one person would raise their hand. But what we do, I would always put the teachers on the spot as well. Show of hands, students and teachers. How many of you all ever heard of Louis Armstrong? I'm looking at the teachers. Not one of them would raise their hand. They don't know. But if I ask them, show of hands, how many of you all ever heard of Usher? Everybody raises their hand. Beyonce, Taylor Swift, they raise their hands for that, you know. How many of you guys ever heard of Fats Domino? No. I'm starting to name all of these big pioneers of New Orleans that helped contribute New Orleans as the birthplace of jazz. And they don't know. Why? Because the teachers don't know. Why? They do not implement music classes the way it used to be when I was growing up. It is now called enrichment classes. Anybody in here, show of hands, are familiar with enrichment classes? Well, enrichment classes, to my knowledge, is nothing but babysitting. Babysitting. I'm the band director. My job is to teach those who are interested in learning a musical instrument, learning how to sing, etc., to teach them how to do that. Give them what they want. That is their right. But no, you call it enrichment class, and yet you have those who are interested, maybe about 10% in that particular class, and with the other 80% is just everybody out of Jane Doe science class, biology class, because it's time for her to go on break. And they dump them all on you. Okay, I asked the administration, okay, I thought I was the band director. Oh yeah, Mr. Ford, you the band director? Okay, so how am I teaching music? Oh, you teach them all of them, teach them all. These kids don't want to learn anything about music. One kid said he thought the music class was actually to sit and listen to whatever they wanted to listen to music-wise. Oh man, I thought this was music, man. Yeah, it is music. It's learning the fundamentals of, I thought we would listen to this music, man. Come on now, Tupac or something, you know? But that's the way it is now. Band director, you're dealing with parades, you're dealing with football games, basketball games, Christmas program, graduation, and with all of that, you babysitting the whole year round. So when do you have the opportunity of teaching those kids? Early in the morning, majority of the schools, inner city schools, the kids are bussed in. So sometimes the buses are not on time. But still, class starts at 7:15. The bus gets there at 6. A lot of the kids, that's their only chance to have breakfast. So where are they? They have to run to the cafeteria. And then they get to you. By the time they sit down, get the instrument set up, ding, 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 you know, it's time to go to class. Okay, the kids want to come to me during lunch hour. Great. Mr. Ford, you have lunch duty. Huh? What? Lunch duty? What is that? Yeah, you have to go out we got you right here by the playground, Mr. Ford, and my band door is right here. So all you got to do is just open the door and just keep an eye on them while the kids are, how am I teaching? You know, I'm looking out there at the playground. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm doing this, you know. And, oh, Mr. Ford, you're the man. You're going to get it right. You're going to do it, you know. So if it's not lunch duty, it's bus duty. If it's not that state exam that they cram these kids for, starting from day 1 to the day of their test, they have to tutor them in the afternoon. So now I got to take my off days, believe it or not, Saturday and Sunday, to try to teach these kids and get some kind of decent sound out of them to prepare them for whatever the case may be. Because if the band fails, they point the finger at me. I'm not the one, you know, that appointed me to lunch duty, you know, bus duty, and then you're tutoring all the kids in the afternoon, or so-and-so can't come today because, you know, he has to do this, he has to do that, she has to do this. Oh, by the way, we need the band to prepare for this community program this weekend, you know, so. But there's no way I can teach, you know, and that's why today's generation, it is what it is.
Right.
Louis, are they coming up, are they teaching these kids in elementary school or grade school?
No,
and
that's-
middle school? They're not teaching them at all?
No, that's
So they're
what
coming to you
that's what I was
completely
just saying to
unprepared.
MJ. No, it's gone. It's gone, but,
Christmas.
you know. We have a music supervisor, not music, the school superintendent. I had the opportunity of talking to him one-on-one. He says he is aware of all of this because he has 2 sons who are music directors in Texas. He's aware of this, and he's working on it. Well, it's 3 years, and it's still the same. You know, it's with the charter system. It's a money grab. It's how many kids they can get into the school system and get $1 off of them, and get those bonuses after the test is over. You know, it is what it is. Yes.
I was just going to mention, on the good news side, in Memphis, there's a nonprofit called the Memphis Jazz Workshop for high school kids. It's not related to any particular school, but you can enroll your kids in there actually teaching them to play some good music.
Yeah.
St.
And,
Louis
you
has
know,
got one too.
Yeah.
Jazz St. Louis.
You know, we've tried, and we have the Trombone Shorty Foundation. Preservation Hall also has an organization to do this, but that's only a small percentage.
Compared to old schools.
You know,
Sure.
when you look at these kids, you know, these brass bands, they don't have time for it. You know, why bother with that? We're already making money.
Right.
You know, and that's the way they see it.
Is NOVA still functional?
The thing is about NOCA, we have our opinions about the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. It's not the same when I was there. I graduated with some great people. The actor, Wendell Pierce, movie, songwriter, multi-Grammy winner, Terrence Blanchard. We went to St. Augustine together, and we both decided, you know, his father decided, my father decided, through persuasion from Ellis Marcellus, hey, marching band is not going to do it. You need to get your kids to NOCA, but the only way you go to the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, you had to go through a public high school system, you know. So NOCA has changed to the jazz director. He's teaching them giant steps. He's teaching them bebop songs, how to play bebop. And there's one kid, this is a great example of what NOCA is doing to these kids in the wrong way. He has great chops on the piano, and he comes to Preservation Home weekly, you know, to listen and want to sit in. And when he sits in with us, I mean, he's all over the place, you know, playing these 11s and everything else on the simple sing school marching in. And his comping style is as if he's a bebopping it away. Again, it's because what they're teaching over there in the music department. And we've tried to reach out to them many a times. Look, this is New Orleans. And if these kids want to make music in New Orleans, become professional musicians, it's okay to teach them what you're doing, but you have to split it up. Give these kids the chance to learn this music. There's a couple of kids that came out of NOCA just recently. I have a student right now who plays tenor saxophone. He made it to the LMEA jazz band. That's in Jefferson Parish, not Orleans Parish. So they have somewhat of a music program there. But he wanted to learn this music so bad, you know. I mean, he would call me constantly. I would give him a list of songs. I would give him a strategy how to go about learning those songs. I would tell him, you have to get on that horse and you have to ride. So you make sure you come to Preservation Hall, Palm Court Jazz Cafe, wherever I'm playing, to get as much experience hands-on, as much as possible. Now, he's working full-time, you know, with a whole bunch of bands, you know, because he took the time out to learn. But that's the only way you can get it done now. You have to pull them away from that. But once they get into that group, you know, and see how easy it is to make easy money like that, it's hard to take them away from that.
Louis, you said earlier yesterday, I guess, that you were teaching for 28 years.
Yes.
So was this in the public school system?
Yes.
Okay, now, you're talking about, 5 minutes ago, you said, well, you have bus duty, you have lunch duty, everything, but your position, your trade is a music teacher.
Yes.
Now, the kids, are they coming, are there still any that want to come and learn music but don't have instruments? Or does the school provide instruments? Or is this only in the charter schools, or is it in the public schools?
The charter schools have money, lots of it.
That's what you're saying.
So, for example, this school, the last school that I taught at was, they had just opened up, maybe about 2 years prior to me getting there. So they wanted a band program. What is that saying? If you build it, they will. Again, it wasn't about the students. It was about them, you know, getting the school recognized so they can get kids in. So they heard about me. They heard about my reputation, how well of an instructor that I was, and they called me up and said, look, we wondered if you can come by like to talk to you about hiring you. I said, well, look, I'm already booked. I already have a teaching gig, and I'm also working at night, playing music. But if you could please come by so we can talk to you. I let it lag for a while. He kept calling. Okay, I'll come over. So what I did was, he called me 7 o'clock in the morning. I didn't answer the phone because I knew it was him. They say he was going to call me, the CEO. So I waited until I went to my school where I was working, and I used my phone. Call ID says West St. John High School, music department. And that shows on his phone, I have a job, so I'm really not interested. But I called him and said, listen, can you come by so we can talk? I said, well, look, I'm in my office right now doing a couple of things. I probably won't be able to get to you until maybe about 6 or so because I have a gig at 8. Oh, no problem, Mr. Ford, I'll wait for you. That's how desperate they were. And sure enough, I went there. Believe it or not, he had a contract already printed out, waiting on me to sign. Why? Again, these people have money. My first year, he offered me a gig for $75,000.
Wow.
And whatever I needed, there was no ifs, ands, and buts, so I get a second and third quote on sousaphones, trumpets. Hey, look, I need sousaphones. Sousaphones, what are those things? That's those big things, huh? Yeah, that's those big things, Well, how much they cost? Well, it varies, but if you want quality, you need to look at King or Selma, and if you're going to be using it for marching, you want something light, fiberglass, so you're looking at in the range of, I say, oh, no problem, just $5,000, $6,000, that's all. They say, oh, that's all? I said, yeah, each. So I wrote out the invoice and everything, what I needed, and they don't even bother. Put my signature on it, put their signature on it, and bam. I need uniforms. Yeah, we need uniforms. How much that's gonna cost? Well, a couple of designs here, this, that, and other thing. You're looking at about 65 students in the band, maybe about 100,000, that's all. No problem, it's for it, So they did all that. They did all that to promote, to get that band rolling. I had no problem. The only problem I had was not having music classes and giving me all these assignments. Oh, Mr. Ford, but all the teachers have to have assignments, In my days, the band director was the band director, 24/7. Yeah, no, I don't have time for that. It takes time to mold these kids into playing an instrument. It takes 3 years to develop a child on an instrument. It does. But they wanted me to, Mr. Ford, can I play in the band? Yeah, here's a trumpet. And sure enough, they want me to suit them up and put them out there on the field or the parades. And then when the band sounds terrible, they look at me.
This is from Andy Griffith, right?
They play the band.
So maybe the problem was that the kids weren't motivated. You could get all the materials you needed, but they didn't have motivated kids.
You pretty much had to bribe those kids.
But
To this day, you had to bribe them. And the way I used to bribe them is that if you be a part of the music program with me, at the end of the year, immediately after graduation ceremonies, pomp and circumstance, there's going to be a bus out there waiting for us to jump on, and we're going to go to Six Flags. Ooh, it's fun, yeah. But you have to be a part of the band, and you have to make sure you prioritize your academics first. You being part of the band is a luxury. So if you want to be a part of this, conduct, your academics, and so on, your attendance. So it was a headache. It was a headache. The reason I got out, and trust me, I did not want to get out. My wife can tell you, we would go to the parades. She would go to the parades to see the costumes and the floats. I went to the parades to listen to the bands. And the bands were just horrific. I said, oh my God, So it's because no band classes. You can't teach these kids. I did a clinic one time at a school, and I was observing how the band director teaches them. They learning the song. They can't read. So what he does, he would hum the rhythm, and if you're playing the trumpet, he's doing this, first valve, 1 and 3, 1 and 2, you know? If that child wants to go to another school where music is placed in front of them, you can forget it, it's not gonna happen. And I always talk to them, ask them about the movie Drumline. They love that movie Drumline, but they do not know the synopsis about that movie. You know, what is this movie about? You know, it's about a drummer who's very gifted, very talented, but guess what? He couldn't read. He couldn't read. You know, so it goes on and on. A lot of people ask me, why did I quit? Well, in my days at St. Augustine High School, we believed in corporal punishment. We believed in corporal punishment. And I got the paddle once. That's all it took, that one time for me to get that paddle. 1/4-inch thick paddle. And the teachers used to joke about it in the teachers' lounge. Hey man, check out my new paddle here, man. Look at this, man. You know? And this is real. And if you were out of line, it wasn't a path. It was like going for a home run, you know? And this was okay with your parents because it was stipulated in the contract. You're going to be in our school. This is what's going to happen to your child. They were okay with that. That's what made us what we are today. As you can see, around the country, of all ethnicities, all these young kids are getting in trouble. Because why? They have no fear. The kids are more protected than you, than the teachers. So the teachers can't touch them. If a teacher touches a kid protecting themselves, guess what? No teachers union. If you hear your name on the intercom, good, you might as well just take your belongings because you know it's about to happen. And that's why I quit. Because teachers were being abused by these kids. You were not allowed to touch those kids, no matter how bad they were, how disruptive they were. You know, so it was a tap on the wrist. So I had to get out. I can talk and talk and talk, and I see Jeff is trying to shut me up, you know, so...
It's always one of those things, you know a real improviser when you see one, wherever it's going to go. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Lewis Ford.